Currey Ingram started with one family and one child. In 1968, a family named the Henderson family went to their church and asked them to do something to help them educate their child, because the public schools were not doing anything to help their child. And the church thought about it, because this was totally new. There were no laws to say that children with disabilities, as they were described, were allowed to receive a specialized education program. And so it took a lot of work. Some brave people, but they started a program. It started, I think, the first year in 1968, September of 1968. I think they had 5 or 6 students in the school, which was in the church basement, and it stayed, Currey Ingram stayed as Westminster School, was Westminster School until the year 2001. And then moved out to a bigger campus in a rural setting just outside of Nashville, and became Currey Ingram Academy, thanks to some very generous benefactors of the school. The mission of Currey Ingram School is to provide an evidence-based educational program for kids with learning differences so that they can achieve their potential. They are smart kids. They are able to do as much as any other student can do. They just need the proper learning environment to be able to do that. Provide the proper resources, the properly trained teachers to be able to fulfill their potential in the classroom.
The school is about 43 years old right now, and the mission is to serve students in kindergarten through 12th grade with language-based learning disabilities such as dyslexia or identified as dyslexia. For students to be accepted here, they have to have a diagnosed language-based learning disability, and that takes an assessment done by a psychologist or a neuropsychologist to understand the way that they think. And what we look for are gaps in ability. So our students here have average to above average IQ, but the products and their educational work, it demonstrates levels very low. So they're intelligent, but at the same time they can't succeed in a typical school, and so we provide a specialized level of education for them that's much more individualized to meet their specific needs. As a consequence, our classes are very small. We have 12 students in every class and 2 teachers. So we have a head teacher in the classroom with an assistant teacher, so we work to constantly engage students in the lesson, to maintain their attention, to maintain their focus, so we can reach their needs and so they can reach their full potential.
And the students come from, really they come from, people move here for our school. We don't have boarding as of now, but people move here. People have moved from 8 different countries, I believe, and over 35 states. Their family cites Currey Ingram as the reason for moving here. And we have people from, even just people who live locally, still travel probably over an hour each way to get here. There's many of people who do that. They people come from over 13 different counties to come here. Any given year it could be from 9 to 15 counties. I believe this year's about 13. And then we have families who in a large number of zip codes even. It's just people travel a great deal of distance to get here.
We do evaluations for people starting as young as age 3 all the way up through adults. And we are looking at things like learning disorders, behavior disorders like ADHD or oppositional defiant disorder, autism spectrum disorders, emotional problems, maybe anxiety, depression, developmental issues, really just a whole broad range of things that we'll assess for. And about a quarter of the students that we see go to school here, and the rest are from public and private schools anywhere else. So they can come to us just for their evaluation even if they don't ever come to this school. So the way that we do it here is they'll be set up for an appointment for their evaluation, and at that time we will send the parents, or if it's an adult, we'll send them the information, or they'll fill out a very detailed social history form. So it'll go over their medical history and their developmental history, school history, family history, just a real detailed social history. And then there's rating scales to be completed where they get rated on various characteristics by parents and teachers usually. Then sometime before we actually see the client, the parents will come in and meet with us and tell us why they're bringing the student in. That usually lasts about an hour. We're just gathering information and making sure that when we go to do our assessment that we're actually assessing what the concerns are. Our testing typically takes between 6 and 8 hours to complete. We usually split that over 2 to 3 sessions, typically in the mornings. And for every student that comes through, we'll at least do a cognitive assessment, an achievement assessment, and a visual motor assessment. And then from there, it's much more specialized to whatever the presenting problem is. So for instance, if it's a student that we really suspect some reading difficulties, we'll spend a lot more time looking more specifically at reading. Or if it's a child on the autism spectrum, we might do some other tests to better understand their cognitive functioning, but also the test that I briefly mentioned to you when we had our last conversation, autism diagnostic observation schedule. We may do something like that. So it really depends on what the problem is. And after that, we gather all the data, we write it up in a really detailed report, including recommendations. So what does all this information mean, or what are you going to do with it? And then we meet back with the families to provide them with all the data from the assessment.
I meet with teachers weekly, and part of the conversation is around their academic groups and how those are going, and are the students still well matched? Is a child falling behind? What else could we add to that child's academic profile? We have different types of programs, I think, for reading, all based in skill development for our struggling readers. Math, we have, again, different curriculum for different needs. However, they're all based on the philosophy that students need to learn by doing. And so a lot of concrete activities before systematically moving to the abstract level. And then for writing, we don't necessarily have a curriculum, but rather a set of strategies and approaches embodied in that the self-regulated strategy development model.
The biggest difference for me is the class size. You're able to, I have one student in my reading class, so I can differentiate everything as needed. I can be exactly on his level. I get to know him inside and out, and we just get to spend a lot of time together. And also the other big difference for me is the administrative support. When I was in a public school, nobody would come to my classroom. Nobody knew what I was doing. I didn't have resources available to help. If I needed something, it was pretty much it was my responsibility to get the materials I needed. But here, our principal is always there. Everybody's available to help, willing to help. If you hear about a new program, they'll send you on a training, so you feel like just very, very supported. So I think the small classroom size and also the
administrative support was the biggest difference for me.
The psychoeducational evaluation reports that we get on each of the students gives us much more of a background into who the students are, and that's not something that I got in the public school. Maybe only 1 or 2 students, whereas here every student has a document, a very lengthy document, to explain how best to teach the student. And one other thing that I have found useful is not just the administrators, but the teachers work together, and we meet, well, for the upper school we meet 1 or 2 times a week, whereas I think in public school we met maybe once a quarter. And so we are very well informed of how students are during the week, not just in the semester.
I just had a student start in January. He came after Christmas, and the day after that we started was his first day at Currey Ingram, and he said, at the end of the day, I said, "What did you think?" And he said, "I loved it, and I couldn't sleep last night because I was so excited to start at Currey Ingram." And I was like, that's awesome. But I think that that's one of my favorite parts of here, is to watch the change in students' confidence. Sometimes our kiddos are coming from other schools where the learning was really hard, their teachers weren't meeting them where they were at, and they started to feel bad about themselves. And so when you see a kid gaining confidence and gaining independence, you know you're making a difference in the best possible way. So I use a program that I got trained in last year that I think only 2 other teachers in the lower school use, so I'll talk about that one just because it's pretty unique. It's called Seeing Stars, and it's mostly based on building visual imagery. So what they do is they tie in their eyes, their ears, their mouth, their hands. So they do something called air writing all the time, and so if there's a word like cat, they do C-A-T. And so they're actually trying to build the image in their mind. And that's how every lesson starts, with air writing. And then gradually you'll move that down to like a strip of paper on the table, where you're doing it on the paper, but still no pencil. And then you move on to a pencil task where you're actually writing the letters. So hopefully the idea is that you build it up so much in your mind that once you close your eyes, you can actually write the letters. So that's just something unique about Seeing Stars as a program.
So this lesson was a review of the rewards program. In the first semester, my students completed the secondary rewards program, which is 20 lessons that focuses on reading fluency and decoding skills, word attack, as well as building some vocabulary. It's mostly focuses on reading multi-syllable words, and we finished it first semester and we just started back second semester, so we were going to be doing the Rewards Plus program, which applies those strategies to social studies texts. And before we jump into that, though, we're doing some review lessons about the reward strategy. At the beginning, we started just reviewing the vowel sounds and vowel combinations. So if A and E are together, what sound does it make? If A and U are together, what sound does it make? We reviewed long and short sounds. We call them vowel sounds or vowel names. And then we did a short review of prefixes and suffixes that we learned during the first semester. And we kind of added in a little bit of practice where they had to brainstorm some words using those prefixes and suffixes. The students usually do pretty well being able to read and remember those prefixes and suffixes. Sometimes applying them and using them can be a little more challenging, so I try to give them a little extra practice in coming up with words as often as we can. And then we went to the actual reward strategy instruction, which we went to the board and circled the prefixes and suffixes and underlined the vowels. That's the actual, they call it the overt strategy for reading longer words. And that's where we start. So if they come to a word they don't know, they actually write out on their paper to do that. The goal is to be able to do that in their heads, and without having to write it down, and they come to a word, they can read it thinking about those strategies without actually writing them down. But we're still writing them down just as practice at this point. And then at the end we did some sentence reading just for fluency, and just checking for understanding with some of the vocabulary words in those sentences.
So, are you ready to get ready? Let's all stretch together. Here we go, stretch up. You're so smart. You're ready to listen and you're ready to start. Okay, let's write some numbers in the sky. Ready? Here we go. Let's write 1. Let's write 2. Back on the railroad track. 2, 2. Let's write 4. Excellent job. Excellent job. All right, let's write some lowercase letters that we already know. You ready? Here we go. Let's write C. Start at 2 o'clock. Good. Let's write A. Excellent job. Let's see if we can write M. Ready? Start on that. Excellent job. Okay, we're going to show them the new letters that we've been learning this week. Okay? Okay. Do you remember any of them? What capitals are we working on? X. X. Excellent. What else?
And V.
And V. And what else?
And C.
And Z. That's right. Slide, climb. Okay. What was so fun about these, because we'd already learned the lowercase is just like the capital. One is small and the other one is
Big.
tall. That's right. Okay. All right. So let's write the capitals in the sky and we'll say how we make them. Okay. You ready? So let's start with X. Start up tall. Ready? Slide, jump, and slide. Excellent. Let's do capital V. Ready? Start up tall. Slide, stop, and climb. Excellent. And let's do Z. You ready? Start at the top. Across, slide, and across. Excellent. Excellent job. We're all done skywriting. So now,
Rainbow.
yes. Let's finger trace really quick. I want you to take your smart finger and trace all of them with your smart finger, okay? Excellent job. Okay, you're going to rainbow write with 2 colors today. Can you choose 2?
This one.
Uh-huh.
And again.
Choose 2.
These markers are washed.
And then while you're rainbow writing, I do create the handwriting curriculum, which we're going to see today, because there's so many needs, and usually a handwriting notebook or folder doesn't support the whole school year, and I want to build other skills like scissor skills and endurance and all that kind of stuff. So that's why I layer those other activities in and build those in. So it is very much tailored from a variety of programs. And then we administer assessment. We do pre and post assessment. You know, we just have them copy and write a few things, do it in the middle of the year and the end of the year so we really can see the output product. And I go into the classroom, each homeroom, at least 1 time a week, and I lead a group like this, and then the teachers carry out what I do. And then we have a lot of collaboration and teacher training and consultation, and we work very close together because of our schools. So for kindergarten and first, for 20 minutes every day, they have handwriting instruction, just kind of like what you saw where they work on letters every day of the week for 25 minutes, 20 to 25 minutes, so 5 times a week. Second grade also has that same type of handwriting time 5 times a week. In third grade, handwriting is 3 times a week, leaving 2 days to focus on keyboarding. So they do keyboarding and then 3 days of handwriting instruction. And fourth grade is the same model, 3 days of handwriting and 2 days of keyboarding. So just real quickly about the schedules that you see. I developed these, but the purpose is to start big, use whole arm movements, and then work down to using your hands. Being able to feel letters in the sky, to have a really strong picture of them. And then being able to finger trace and rainbow write is more repetition when you're learning something, and the color is motivating, and it's a bigger model than having to use a pencil, and so kind of working down to that refined space. But I'll just show you kind of what I'm thinking. All of these start at the top and come down, and so I've put those together and I've given them like a language. So like H is start tall, down, up, and over. And I try to use things that is familiar versus directions, because I want them to have an understanding of what I'm talking about. Sometimes with our kids, understanding directions, left, right, curve over, can be hard. But for example, like when I teach C, which helps you make O, which helps you make A, which helps you make D, I talk about a clock. And we start at 2 o'clock and we curve around, because they can see a clock and image a clock versus just trying to make a curve sometimes can be a little too abstract for little kids. This little guy, at the time we were doing this, he was just learning cursive in kindergarten, because the print is actually new for us. And it was the beginning of summer, and when I said write the alphabet without any supports, just from memory, this is what he put down. And we see like this weird spacing that drifts over here. We do see a mix of case, and we see capitals with lowercase. So I started working with him, and I had to use a lot of these visual supports. I did a lot of multisensory instruction to help him understand the letters. This is the same task, write the alphabet from memory, and you can see how he needs these visual guides. He can write his letters small and refined in this space, but he needs that visual support, because understanding how to organize the space is really hard for him. Okay? Oh, but we can see right here, this is supposed to be an X, and he wrote a T. And that's a clue that you kind of struggle with that kind of crossing midline. Like that's a struggle with a lot of our kids, being able to do that. So that's always, handwriting is always gives you clues to what's going on. And then his teacher and I decided that we needed to do more in class in language arts, because he was having a hard time generalizing what he could do into class. So we set up a plan, like during his dictation time in language arts, that one day dictation would be writing in Play-Doh. One day would be writing on the chalkboard, because it's much more resistive. One day, just for fun, they used their dry erase markers and wrote on the table and cleaned it off. And then one day we did shaving cream. And then of course there was a day where you actually put the pencil to paper. But providing these different multisensory supports helped him to understand and learn how to use handwriting more effectively in class.
We're always looking for new and better ways to educate our students. We're always challenged. Every student provides a unique problem to solve for us. And for example, like I mentioned before, we rely on what good research, established research, tells us we should do with, say, a child with dyslexia or an ADHD student. And we depend on that. As one example, one of the new areas of research relates more specifically to how the brain functions, right down to the brain and learning. And there's so much potential that we're looking at now to enhance our evidence-based approach with looking at how and where in the brain certain things happen, and how to adapt our instructional practices accordingly. It's important to know that we are a school that provides more than just an educational program that's suitable for the students. We provide opportunities, extracurricular opportunities like sports and the arts. So our kids can play sports, our kids can be in plays and things like that. And that's a big part of why we're successful too, And I think that's something that's not easy, that costs money, and you have to think about how to do that very carefully and very slowly build that up. But providing success in those opportunities is a big part of why we're successful in the classroom. So a lot of our kids, for example, would never make a basketball team, say in a public school or another independent school, but they can play basketball here. We're usually not as good as some of the other, but they get to play here. And because they get to play here, or because we have what's called a no-cut policy. I don't know what it's like in Russia, but that means that if a student goes out for the basketball team, they get to play on the basketball team. They don't get cut from the basketball team. If a student goes out for the play here at Currey Ingram, they get to be in the play. Now, they may not be a very good actor, and they might have a very minor role, but they get to be in it. They're not excluded from that. And having success in those experiences is very important for success in the classroom. It builds up their confidence, because one of the biggest challenges, quite honestly, is that students have lived a portion of their life before they get here, and they have unfortunately experienced a lot of failure in their previous school environment. So they come in with what's known in the research, a lot of them come in with what's known as learned helplessness. And so the idea of they're afraid to try because they failed so many times, say with reading and writing especially, so that sometimes they are their own worst enemy in terms of their own learning. And it takes a long time to unlearn that, and it's very important that you provide as many success opportunities for them as possible, for them to unlearn that. And it does take a long time because it is a powerful force to try and undo.
In an ideal world, everybody would go to one school, right? But this is not an ideal world, and our students have special needs. To go with the model of having a generalized public school with that smaller space for the students that have these needs, I think that creates a more difficult situation for them in terms of the social aspect of, you're with your peers, and then you have to go to this special place and everyone goes everywhere else. That creates that label, that difficulty socially for these students. When they come to a school like Churchill, they're here with people that learn just like they do. And so there's a comfort level that's created by that. And when we have athletics, we have everything that a typical school would have. So we compete against regular schools. You can't tell the difference on the basketball court or on the tennis court or anywhere who has a learning disability and who doesn't. In every other aspect of their lives, our students are the same as their typically developing peers. But when they're here, they feel better about themselves because they know that they're in an environment that understands them. They know that their peers understand them, versus going somewhere where there's this small sort of resource space for them to go. They go into it and then they come out and everyone's looking at them like, why do you get to go in that room and everyone else has to learn in a regular space? It's because you can't. When they come here, they realize they can, and they develop much better. So that separation, although not ideal in the grand scheme of things, of course you want every school to be able to meet every student's needs, but that's just not reality. So schools like Churchill are necessary because if a student doesn't have good self-esteem and they're not ready and willing to learn, it's that much harder to reach them. But when they come here, they feel comfortable, they feel confident in themselves, and they go on. When it comes to going to college, they're going to a lot of the same places where kids from the regular schools are going. And I always tell the students and their parents, it's not a sprint. You're not trying to get from point A to point B as quickly as possible. It's a marathon, and there's ups and downs, and it takes time. So if you're a student, you have a student in kindergarten, and you're already worried about college, or first grade, you're already worried about college. You have to take a breath and get through all of those grades in between first. Otherwise, college isn't going to be an option. but providing the best educational environment for that individual student is what matters. And schools like Churchill allow for that. And thus they can go on and they'll meet up with their typical peers when they get to college and say, here I am right next to you. We're achieving at the same level. You went to that school because it worked for you. I went to Churchill because it worked for me. And here we are together again. So it's necessary, I think. I have not seen an impact on what a student's career path is, what they want to do, align with the disability that they might have. We've had students that graduated from Churchill and they've come back to talk to our current students. They're doctors, they're lawyers. We have a student that works for the FBI, authors, actors, actresses, singers, and they do what they want to do. And actually having dyslexia or ADD, ADHD allows them to think a little bit differently and better prepares them for a lot of the things they might face. We have some small business owners who've graduated from Churchill. Because of their ADHD, they can see all kinds of things at one time that somebody that doesn't have ADHD has to focus very narrowly, but they can see the bigger picture and they're successful as entrepreneurs, as business people that way. So I have not yet seen somebody's learning disability limit what they want to do or the career they choose to have.
On the financial side, it costs a lot of money to run a school like this. There's no shortcuts. It really helps to have benefactors. But I think the good news is that it is an idea or a concept or a mission that people get behind. This school happened because this version of this school happened because there is connection to some very wealthy and powerful individuals who happen to have a heart this big. And their own children were children that went to this school. And so they had a passion for it.
Most of our students receive some level of state funding. The rest are private pay. And so the state and the school district of New York City will place students with us. They'll call our admissions office and say, we have this particular student's not achieving in their 4th grade class in public school number 65 or wherever. Can you meet the student's needs? So we'll look at the profile of the student, and if it's appropriate, we'll bring the student and family in for an interview and accept them to come to our program, and the state will pay for that. Others come to us in what we call unilateral placement, where a family comes and says, my school district's not serving my child well, we want a spot at Churchill, and they'll come and they'll pay the full tuition and do everything on their own. But with that said, and with the options parents have, there's always room for more schools like ours. The number of students are there, and we could only house so many here. You know, each of our schools were in a large city, so we don't have that much space. So frankly, if we hit 400 students, we'd really be maxed out in terms of the number of students that we could support based on our class size model and based on the facility.
So how did I get to Currey Ingram and how long have we been here? My son is 13 years old now in the 8th grade, and he has been here since kindergarten. So he was about 5 years old when he enrolled at the school. And he was one of the kind of kids that, as a little bitty boy, had some abilities that were beyond his peers. For instance, reading. He was reading fluently by 3 and 4 years old, but he had some delays in areas that seemed a little easier for his peers. So things like handwriting, you know, children that age learned to write their name, cutting with scissors, very visual art projects. In grade school here in the United States, the little children do a lot of art and puzzles and visual work, and that was hard for him. So he would cry or resist that work, and we realized we needed to get him some help. How has this school changed Will's life? The ways are many, and we don't probably have time for all of them, so I'll hit the high points. As a young boy, he needed to gain confidence, and he needed to understand that everybody's different, and that it's okay to have some things that are really easy for you and some things that are really hard. He had what the teachers called a low frustration tolerance. So he was quick to cry or get frustrated and not be able to necessarily progress academically because he'd kind of get just, really locked up with frustration. So this school very lovingly and carefully and intentionally stepped him through that. They even put him in a class in 3rd grade called Handling Frustration. And 40 minutes a day, all week, he would go to that tutorial, and they would intentionally frustrate the boys with board games and other activities that the teacher knew would eventually create conflict. And then they would help the boys work through not just giving up, but pushing through. And to this day, now, however many years later, I know I'm his mother, but I truly believe he's an exceptional young man in the areas that we were the most worried about back then. He's very patient, he's very hardworking, and he really does persevere beyond really some of the ways that I would persevere without his difficulties.
What's good about it? Oh, wow, there's a great community, great individualized classes, and really good teachers. I've really liked middle school so far. I like creative writing. I like to write stories and persuasive things, and I can't talk today. I feel like it gets my ideas that are in my head out into the world in the form of an assignment. I like George Orwell. I read 1984, I think last summer. Let's see. I like Ray Bradbury. I like a lot of science fiction. I really like The Hobbit. Who doesn't like The Hobbit? Yeah, I like everything. I want to be a music producer. I'm a musician. I do piano. We have an in-school middle school rock band for 7th and 8th grade, and I do keys in that. And we did every year, at the end of every semester, the school holds a festival called Band Fest, and it's just the middle school and high school rock bands, and we go out and perform in the quad outside to people, and the entire school is there and just having a good time, and it's been really fun to play at that. I did it last year too. I also play guitar and drums, but not as much as the piano. My favorite thing I ever did here was last year the rock band went to perform a fundraiser at Douglas Corner Cafe, which is downtown, and it got sold out, and it was really, really fun. We played all the songs we did at Band Fest, which was I think a month before. It was really fun. Lots of people came out to see, and I think we raised a lot of money for the charity that we were doing.
My name's Jack. I'm 18 and I am a senior. I've been at Currey Ingram since kindergarten. I like the structure and just the real feeling of community that Currey Ingram brings to the students, and the relationships the teachers are able to have with students is really nice. I would probably have to say giving me confidence, not only confidence in my abilities and who I am, but confidence to maybe ask for help if I don't understand something or I need help with something, the confidence to ask for help.
Lives are changed at a school like this. And when lives are being changed and it's clear and obvious to parents, for example, that this is happening, then you have a good chance of having parents or other people with resources to help out, to create something like this. Because this is how it happened at Currey Ingram, and how it happened at, there's probably 20 or 30 schools across America similar to Currey Ingram. And it's pretty much the same in every school, that people quickly saw what providing the proper educational program for these kids could do. And where they weren't making any progress before, they would almost immediately start making progress because they were given the proper structure, the proper instruction.